I'm going to try to be brief. I'm here on 3 bills. You gave us, the Senate gave us time, Lori and I, to do a presentation on the millionaire's tax. We've submitted extensive testimony. I'm here in strong opposition to the governor's proposed millionaire's tax in the budget, as well as a similar bill that would impose that tax at a lower income threshold, $640,000. I'm here also to support Senate Bill 2672 that would cut income taxes for all Rhode Islanders by 10% over a 5-year period. We at RIPEC yesterday released a scorecard on Rhode Island's economic prosperity. It found that our state's economy is losing ground to other states and to the U.S. overall. We should be focused on how to make our state more competitive and not less competitive. I have a lot of respect for Alan. We actually talk quite frequently. I have respect for EPI. But we live in a competitive environment. Income inequality is a serious issue. It's getting worse in this country. But when states try to tackle that issue, it is risky. There is risk there. And there's more risk for a small state like Rhode Island, and there's more risk for a state that doesn't have that much going for it in terms of magnet industries. So I think the risk is there. We have not tried to oversell in our reports, in our testimony, what could happen here. I actually think it would be personally very bad because it sends a message that we don't care that much about business development. We care about other things more. But in our research, we know people move for a bunch of different reasons. They invest for a bunch of different reasons. But there is definitely a risk, and we know this from our own experience, that people move because of taxes, that Massachusetts is having a public debate about its own competitiveness, that California with their wealth tax is seeing people fleeing, that New York is losing people. So we know that these things in real life are out there, that we have that risk. And I think what I would say is why would we take on that risk? On the tax increase, the proposal, Alan's right, the people who benefit are the higher income folks. By the way, that's the policy that the General Assembly has made in terms of our progressive rates. The cuts are in direct relation to what people pay in their taxes. That's how we cut these taxes in the 1980s and the 1990s when we did a similar 10% cut. So it sounds like a radical idea to cut income taxes. The majority of states, 27, between FY 2020 and 2024, reduced the rate of one major tax. So actually it did happen. Those states decided that it made some sense. We did not, by the way. We did get rid of the car tax at an earlier time, which was important, but we did not do that. So my point is, why are we taking on this risk? There hasn't been a shortfall in state revenues. The money is still coming in. They're continuing to grow. We'll hear from the Revenue Estimating Conference, but I expect our state revenues will grow next year at least the rate of inflation. We have taken on some serious consequences through H.R. 1. There are people who are going to they're starting to lose Medicaid coverage. They're losing health source. They're losing SNAP benefits. But by the way, federal money is going to grow in the next budget, probably at least the rate of inflation. Medicaid from the federal government is going to go up greater than the rate of inflation in this next budget. So this idea that there's been huge cut in federal money is actually, we're going to get less than we would have gotten, but is actually not the case. That money is still, the Congress has a similar spending problem. They're going to keep sending money and spending money. Massachusetts, first of all, is an outlier in not adopting this tax. So we're copying them, even though they're against the overwhelming trend of states cutting taxes. And it has not all been positive. They're losing population. They're among one of the highest states in the proportion that they've lost population. Alan's right when we talk about losing net migration. It's a complicated thing, but according to the data, we've only had 1 year of data since the millionaire's tax. They've lost $4.2 billion, in taxpayer income, 70% of that coming from people who made over 200,000, which is double the rate than 5 years ago. So we know that there's a higher proportion of higher income people. And where are those Massachusetts tax dollars going? Most of them went to Florida and New Hampshire, 2 states without an income tax. Some went to Rhode Island. We got $200 million of taxpayer dollars from Massachusetts. By the way, if you go back several years, we were a net loser. This is a new thing in the last 4 or 5 years that we're getting substantial tax dollars from Massachusetts. So why would we give up that advantage that we're having right now? So, and I think is that the millionaire's tax? Actually, it started with COVID and remote work, has a lot more to do with that, but it has to do with probably our cheap housing, believe it or not, compared to Massachusetts. But I just think this is a critical issue, and I know there's a lot of hard choices, but I just ask for your consideration.
Is what your research or what your organization's research suggests are viable revenue streams for the state? As my colleague, who's not here anymore, mentioned, y'all have done a great job at raising issues that we should be funding. A little bit weaker on the ways to fund them. So I'm wondering if you could tell us about that. The second is I'm interested in learning more about benevolent employers. And so there's this assertion that if we cut taxes on the wealthy or on the rich, that they will invest them. In effect, getting to my earlier question, converting money to capital. And in particular, there's this kind of through line there that then they're going to invest that in their workers. And there is nothing in law that compels employers to be benevolent employers. There is a myth that they might be, that they might pay better wages, that they might provide better benefits. And what you're asking is in part that the state step aside and allow employers to be benevolent employers. So I'm wondering if you could give us examples where that's been the case and where it hasn't been that the state compelled the employer to provide certain benefits. Because when we're having a conversation about cutting taxes to employers so that they will reinvest it in their employees, at the same time, you're having representatives of those employers come here and say, we don't want to expand TDI and TCI, even though those programs are paid by the employees themselves. You have people coming in and saying, don't tell us to don't mandate certain coverage of insurance because we can't afford it or our employees can't afford it. So can you give us tangible examples of benevolent employers reinvesting funds without being compelled to do so by the state? And what does your organization propose as viable revenue streams for the state in the absence of raising taxes on wealthy Rhode Islanders?
So Senator Costa always has the most difficult questions, besides the chairman, of course. But first of all, I heard Senator Murray talk about, and obviously RIPEC is just not about cutting taxes. We want to invest, but we're not looking for new sources of revenue. If you look at since FY19, we've collected in state general revenues, not the federal money, nearly $600 million more money than we would have gotten if it went up at the rate of inflation, the cost of living. So there's been plenty of money coming in. By the way, income tax alone have gone up through that period nearly $200 million more than if they had gone up inflation. So I don't think we actually need more money. On your second point, our report that came out yesterday, our gross domestic product of our state is low. And what that means is we don't have a lot of employers that are selling their goods and services outside of the state of Rhode Island. We don't have those bigger companies. We have some, but we don't have enough of them that are creating a lot of value. Now, the question is, are they going to share that value with their employees? Not always, right? Sometimes they don't. But what we found is that those high GDP companies, those advanced manufacturing companies, of financial services companies that sell products tend to have higher wages, and they also tend to have better benefits, both retirement benefits and health benefits. And so, maybe that comes to things like unionization or different standards, but if you look at what we're lacking those companies that offer a package of wages and benefits based on the value they're creating in the market. And so I think that's a very important thing that we should, but you raise a very good point. Sometimes we make businesses profitable and they don't share. I'm going to say one other thing. We are supporting the tax cut, but actually we're spending most of our time fighting a tax increase. So we're not actually up here talking about let's cut taxes for employers. That's not the debate that's happening up here. No one's actually talking about that.
Thank you, Senator Zurrier.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. DiBiase. Let me start by saying that we're very fortunate to have RIPEC in Rhode Island. You hold a dinner every year. We go to those dinners. We say we value your advice, and sometimes you think, do they really value it? We value your advice, and you've helped Senator Acosta and me in terms of education policy, City of Providence. Second, RIPEC is very fortunate to have you as director, because among other things on your resume is chief of staff to one governor and director of administration to another. So I'd like
I fear a tough question coming on.
Yeah.
Be prepared. It's coming.
Flattery.
It's coming.
So I have a practical question for you based on the scenario we're in. And I'm not saying it's your fault. RIPEC and the business community, you've been telling us about this since January. But it's now April 30th. It's an election year. In all likelihood, we're going to finalize our budget in a month, 4 weeks. So suppose you're the chief of staff to the governor. The governor says, okay, I've listened to RIPEC. I think they're right. We've got to reduce our revenues by $67 million in state revenues, and that can have all kinds of implications for losses of federal revenues as well. And you have a lot of foresight. And you say, look, Governor, I've been on top of this. I've got a package. This is how to do it. This is the best way. That's what you did as director of administration. Now you're chief of staff. Do you think you can bring a package of $67 million in cuts to the General Assembly on May 1st and get it passed and properly vetted and passed by the end of the month?
So that was a harder question than I expected. But first of all, we're having a revenue and estimating conference. Historically, there has been more revenues. That may not happen this year, but so the environment might change, right? So I would say that's one thing. I think the other is that we don't have a revenue shortfall. So these dollars were used in the budget, but they were also used for spending increases and tax cuts and other things that you'll have to decide on. There's also built-in spending you know this better than I do, in the state budget. We have education funding that goes up through a formula that happens to be above the rate of the revenues coming in. We have Medicaid commitments that automatically go up, state spending higher than the rate of inflation. So we begin in the hole. So I do think there's more flexibility in a budget. That's why I started what is the urgency this year of doing this? Is this a year where revenues went flat or went negative? Is there some major thing that we have to come up with right now? But you raise a good point. If revenues come in flat in May, or if they go down, then in this conference, then the decisions get a lot harder.
Yeah, I'll just push you a little bit. You, as a director of administration, you figured out, you solved all these policy issues. But as chief of staff, you've got a political issue, because you'd be going to all these departments saying, here's how you have to reduce your budget. There might have to be additional hearings in the finance committees of each of these. Each of those, each affected stakeholder group is going to come in and screen. How can you do all of that in 4 weeks?
I guess I would push back on, this is now my 6th or 7th year fighting some version of the millionaire's tax. Has it always been about the revenue and the budget and the balancing, and does it have to be 50% higher than the top rate? So I think, this doesn't seem to me to be all about resources and budget, and I think that's unfortunate, because there is a message being sent with that type of proposal in terms of who we care about and who we don't care about.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank